7 years of marriage. I thought I knew everything about Melissa, from her favorite breakfast cereal to how she always double-checked the front door before bed. We had built what I believed was a solid life together, a foundation I was proud of. Then came the night I discovered text messages on her iPad while she was showering. Messages with her coworker Jason that no married woman should be sending to another man. When confronted, Melissa did not deny it. Instead, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "This affair is actually strengthening our marriage, Franklin." Apparently, my wife had been reading too many modern relationship blogs about open marriages being the solution to marital boredom. Before I tell you what happened next and the plan I came up with, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe honesty is non-negotiable in relationships, and subscribe to hear how I reclaimed my dignity and rebuilt my life after discovering my wife's twisted logic. I never imagined my life would include the phrase, "my cheating wife." Growing up in a small town outside of Chicago, I was raised with traditional values about marriage and commitment. At 35, I had built a respectable career as a structural engineer working on some of the most ambitious building projects in the Midwest. My days were filled with calculations, site visits, and ensuring that the structures I helped design would stand the test of time. The irony that my marriage could not do the same is not lost on me. Melissa and I met at a mutual friend's housewarming party 8 years ago. She was vivacious, intelligent, and had this infectious laugh that would make an entire room turn to find its source. As a marketing specialist for a growing tech company, she had a way with words that could convince anyone of anything, a skill I would later come to recognize as dangerous. We dated for 2 years before getting married, in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family who believed as we did that we were perfect for each other. We bought a house in a nice suburb complete with the white picket fence and enough bedrooms for the children we planned to have. Our weekends were filled with home improvement projects, dinner parties with friends, and planning for the future. From the outside, we were the couple others aspired to be. The first signs of trouble appeared so gradually that I almost missed them. Melissa's company was growing rapidly, and she began attending more networking events that often ran late into the evening. At first, it seemed reasonable. Success required sacrifice, and I wanted to support her career. But soon the late nights became more frequent, and her explanations more vague. Another networking event, I would ask, as she dressed in a new outfit I had never seen before. "Yes, potential clients will be there." "This could mean a big account for us," she would reply, applying perfume with more care than a typical business meeting would warrant. Then there were the text messages. Melissa began guarding her phone, turning it face down whenever I entered the room and changing her password from our anniversary date to something I did not know. When she would get a message, a small smile would play on her lips, the kind of smile that used to be reserved for me. In conversation, one name began to appear with increasing frequency: Jason, from the creative team. How he had the most innovative ideas. How he understood her vision when others did not. How they had such creative chemistry. "You talk about Jason a lot," I mentioned casually one evening over dinner. "Do I?" she said, her fork pausing midway to her mouth. "He is just really good at his job. We work closely on the new campaign." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, until the receipts started appearing for dinners, at restaurants we had never visited together, and weekend team meetings became commonplace. The final straw came when she mentioned a Thursday night strategy session, and I decided to drive by her office on my way home from a late project meeting. Her car was not in the parking lot. Acting on an instinct I wish I had not had to develop, I drove to a restaurant she had mentioned enjoying with her team. There they were at a corner table by the window, my wife and Jason from the creative team. His hand was covering hers on the table, and the way she looked at him was painfully familiar. It was the way she used to look at me. I did not confront them there. Instead, I took several photos, with my phone, drove home, and waited for her return. When Melissa finally came home at 1130 that night, I was sitting at our kitchen table with the photos displayed on my laptop screen. She stopped short when she saw me, her expression shifting from surprise to something like resignation. "I was going to tell you," she said before I could speak, dropping her purse on the counter. "Tell me what exactly," I asked, turning the laptop so she could clearly see the images. "That you are having dinner with your coworker at a romantic restaurant. That you are holding hands with him. That you have been lying to me for months." What happened next was the most shocking part of the entire ordeal. Instead of denying it or breaking down in tears, Melissa pulled out a chair and sat down with an air of someone about to give a presentation. "Franklin, I have not been entirely honest with you, but it is not what you think," she began, her voice steady. "Yes, I am seeing Jason, but I do not consider it cheating. I see it as expanding our marriage." I stared at her, speechless. "Marriage in its traditional form is outdated," she continued. "Monogamy puts too much pressure on one person to fulfill all of another's needs. I have been reading a lot about ethical non-monogamy and open relationships. Many modern couples are finding that these arrangements actually strengthen their primary relationship." The calm, rehearsed quality of her words made it clear she had been preparing this speech for some time. It felt like being in a bizarre business meeting rather than a confrontation about infidelity. "So you are sleeping with your coworker to strengthen our marriage?" I asked. My voice strained with the effort to remain composed. "I am exploring a connection that fulfills certain needs, yes. But you are still my husband, Franklin. I still love you and want our life together." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Jason provides intellectual stimulation and new experiences. But you are my partner, my home." "How generous of you to still include me," I said with sarcasm, barely masking my pain. "This does not have to be one-sided," she added quickly. "You could explore connections too. Many couples find that outside relationships bring new energy into their marriage. They come back to each other with fresh perspectives, new appreciation." I sat in stunned silence as my wife continued to explain how her betrayal was actually a progressive step for our relationship. She cited articles, podcasts, and even research studies that supposedly validated her actions. According to Melissa, jealousy was an outdated emotion, a product of possessiveness and insecurity that evolved humans were learning to overcome. "We never discussed any of this," I finally managed to say. "You made this decision unilaterally without my consent or knowledge. That is not an open relationship, Melissa. That is cheating." "I knew you might react this way initially," she countered. "That is why I waited to bring it up. I wanted to be sure about my feelings before potentially disrupting our marriage. I was planning to talk to you about it soon. After how many months of sleeping with him? How long has this been going on exactly?" She hesitated for the first time. "We have been exploring our connection for a few weeks. I knew from the text messages I had seen that was a lie. This had been going on for months. I would like you to sleep in the guest room tonight," I said, standing up from the table. "I need space to process this." That night was the longest of my life. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying our entire marriage in my mind. Had there been signs I missed beyond the recent months? Had she always viewed our vows as flexible guidelines rather than promises? I thought about the children we had been discussing, having the decades of future we had planned together. By morning, I had not slept, but I had reached a clarity. I had not expected this marriage was over. Not because I could not forgive a mistake, but because Melissa and I now had fundamentally different views of what marriage meant. The revelation brought a strange calm. For the first time since discovering the affair, my mind cleared enough to think strategically. If Melissa could approach our marriage like a business arrangement, so could I. And in business, you never show your full hand until the right moment. Over breakfast the next morning, I surprised myself with my composure. Melissa approached cautiously, clearly expecting tears or rage. "I have been thinking about what you said," I told her, pouring a cup of coffee. "I need time to process everything, but I understand that relationships evolve." The relief on her face was immediate and palpable. "I knew you would understand once you had time to think about it. This can be a positive change for both of us, Franklin." Maybe I said non-committally. "I just need some time to adjust to the idea." That morning marked the beginning of what I came to think of as my three-phase plan. I did not call it that out loud, of course. To Melissa, it appeared that I was reluctantly accepting our new modern marriage arrangement. In reality, I was methodically preparing for its end. Phase 1 focused on financial preparation. While maintaining the appearance of normal daily life, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank than the one we shared. Each paycheck, I began diverting a small portion of my income into this account, not enough to be immediately noticeable in our joint finances. I also began cataloging our assets, making copies of important financial documents, and understanding exactly where we stood financially as a couple. During this phase, I also consulted with a divorce attorney, meeting during my lunch hours to ensure Melissa would not find out. The attorney, a straightforward woman named Patricia, helped me understand my rights and what to expect in a divorce proceeding. Illinois, being an equitable distribution state rather than a community property state, meant that our assets would be divided fairly but not necessarily equally in a divorce. She advised me to gather evidence of the affair, not for revenge, but because it might impact certain financial aspects of our separation. Divorce is not just emotional, it is financial and legal, Patricia explained. The better prepared you are on all fronts, the smoother the process will be. Phase 2 involved gathering evidence. Though I already had proof of the affair in the form of text messages and photos I needed to establish its duration and extent. I installed recovery software on our shared home computer, which allowed me to retrieve deleted messages from when Melissa occasionally used it instead of her work laptop. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions the affair had been going on for 8 months, not the few weeks she had claimed. More disturbingly, I found emails where she discussed me with Jason, analyzing my personality and behavior as if I were a case study rather than her husband. Franklin is so traditional, she wrote in one message. He sees marriage as this sacred institution rather than a living arrangement that can evolve. It is both endearing and frustrating. Reading those words felt like a second betrayal, a dissection of my character behind my back. During this time, Melissa seemed to take my apparent acceptance of the situation as permission to be more open about her relationship with Jason. She began mentioning him in casual conversation, though still with a careful measure of restraint. Jason recommended a great book on relationship dynamics, she would say, or, "There is this new restaurant Jason discovered that we should try sometime." Each mention was like a small dagger, but I maintained my facade of gradual acceptance. Phase 3 was perhaps the most important building, a foundation for my new life. I researched apartments in a neighborhood across town, one that would allow a reasonable commute to work but provide enough distance from our current home. I signed up for personal development courses I had always been interested in but never pursued. I reconnected with friends I had somewhat neglected during my marriage, being careful to not reveal the true state of my relationship yet. All the while I presented to Melissa the image of a husband slowly coming around to her modern view of marriage. I asked questions about open relationships, pretended to read articles she suggested, and generally gave the impression of someone reluctantly but steadily accepting a new paradigm. "I appreciate your willingness to consider this," Melissa told me one evening, about a month into my plan. "Many people would just react with anger without trying to understand. I value our relationship enough to at least explore different perspectives." I replied, the words tasting bitter but necessary. As my plan progressed, Melissa grew increasingly comfortable with the arrangement, which led to her most audacious suggestion yet. "I was thinking," she said one evening as we were preparing dinner, "maybe we could have Jason over for dinner sometime. It might help normalize things. Let you see that he is just a person, not a threat." I nearly dropped the knife I was using to chop vegetables. The idea of hosting my wife's lover in our home, breaking bread with him at our table, felt like an insult of the highest order. But it also presented the perfect opportunity for the final phase of my plan. "Actually," I said, mastering my expression, "that might be a good idea." "When were you thinking?" Melissa looked genuinely pleased, perhaps mistaking my agreement for true acceptance. "Maybe next Friday I could cook that salmon dish you like." "Perfect," I said already, mentally preparing for what would become the most surreal dinner party of my life. The week leading up to the dinner was a flurry of final preparations. I signed a lease on an apartment beginning the following month. I finalized arrangements with my attorney. I packed a few essential items and stored them in my office at work, ready for a quick exit. By Friday evening, everything was in place for what I had come to think of as my liberation day. Melissa spent the afternoon cooking and cleaning, seemingly excited about bringing these two parts of her life together. She changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a blue dress I had once told her was my favorite. The irony was not lost on me. Jason arrived at 7, bearing an expensive bottle of wine and a nervous smile. He was younger than I had expected, probably in his late 20s, with the carefully cultivated appearance of someone who considered themselves creative and intellectual. He shook my hand with a firm grip, meeting my eyes with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "Franklin, it is great to finally meet you. Melissa talks about you all the time." "Does she?" I replied, accepting the wine bottle. "All good things, I hope." "Of course," he said, following me into the dining room where Melissa was lighting candles. "She says you are the most understanding husband she has ever met." I nearly laughed at that. Understanding was certainly not the word I would have chosen. Dinner began with awkward small talk about work, the weather and neutral topics that carefully avoided the elephant in the room. Jason was clearly uncomfortable, glancing between Melissa and me as if waiting for some signal about how to behave. Melissa, meanwhile, maintained a bright, forced cheerfulness, refilling wine glasses and encouraging conversation as if we were just three friends having a normal dinner party. As we finished the main course, Melissa excused herself to prepare dessert, leaving Jason and me alone at the table. The silence that fell was thick with unspoken words. So I said finally, "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" Jason choked slightly on his wine. I thought you were okay with the arrangement. Melissa said you had discussed everything. Did she mention that she only told me about it after I caught her, that there was no agreement before she started seeing you? His expression shifted from discomfort to genuine surprise. She said you had been talking about opening the marriage for months, that it was a mutual decision. Before I could respond, Melissa returned with a chocolate cake, her smile faltering slightly when she noticed the tension. "Everything okay in here, just getting to know each other better," I said, summoning a smile of my own. "Actually, I was about to share some news with both of you." News? Melissa set down the cake, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Yes. Since we are being open and honest about exploring connections outside our marriage, I thought I should let you know that I have also been seeing someone." The change in Melissa's expression was instantaneous and revealing. Her smile dropped, replaced by a look of shock, and what could only be described as jealousy. "You have someone I met recently. Someone who has been incredibly helpful and supportive during a difficult time in my life." I took a sip of wine, enjoying perhaps pettily the moment of suspense. "Do I know them?" Melissa pressed her voice tight. "I do not believe so, but she is right over there." I pointed to a briefcase I had strategically placed on the sideboard before dinner. "Her name is Patricia Winters, and she is my divorce attorney." The silence that followed was absolute. Jason looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Melissa stared at me, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and finally understanding. "Divorce attorney," she repeated, as if the words were in a foreign language. I stood up, walked to the briefcase, and returned with a manila envelope. "These are divorce papers, Melissa. I have had them prepared for weeks. You see, while you thought I was coming around to your idea of an open marriage, I was actually making a plan of my own. A plan to start a new life without betrayal and manipulation." I placed the envelope on the table between us. "I have already secured an apartment. Most of my essential belongings have been moved. The papers detail an equitable division of our assets based on Illinois law." But I thought you understood." Melissa stammered, tears forming in her eyes. "I thought we were working through this together." "The only thing I understand is that we have fundamentally different views on what marriage means. You believe it is flexible, open to interpretation and expansion. I believe it is a commitment between two people who are faithful to each other in every way." Jason stood up awkwardly. "I should probably go." "Actually, you might as well stay," I said, surprisingly calm. "You are as much a part of this story as either of us. Besides, there is dessert." No one laughed at my poor attempt at humor. Jason sat back down looking miserable. Melissa was now fully crying, her carefully applied makeup beginning to streak. "Franklin, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake. I should have talked to you first before starting anything with Jason." "The problem is not the lack of discussion, Melissa. It is the betrayal itself. It is the fact that you could look me in the eye day after day while sleeping with someone else. It is the fact that when caught, rather than showing remorse, you tried to convince me that your affair was somehow beneficial to our marriage." I turned to Jason. "Did you know she was selling you this narrative of a mutually agreed upon open marriage? Or did you actually believe you were entering into an ethical arrangement?" After the disastrous dinner party ended with Jason making a hasty exit, Melissa and I were left alone in the house that had once felt like our sanctuary. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as she followed me from room to room, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "You cannot be serious about this divorce," she kept saying. "We can fix this. Couples recover from affairs all the time. This is not just about the affair," I explained as I packed a suitcase with the remaining items I needed. "It is about realizing we have completely different values. You genuinely believed that cheating could improve our marriage. I could never trust your judgment again after that." "I was confused," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I read all these articles about modern relationships, and got caught up in the idea. It was a mistake, Franklin. I was wrong. Looking at her tear-stained face, I felt a moment of doubt. We had shared 7 years together, built a life made memories. Was I being too harsh, too unforgiving? But then I remembered the emails I had found. Her clinical dissection of my personality, the months of lies, and the certainty returned. If you had come to me before starting anything with Jason, if you had been honest about your feelings or desires, we might have had a different conversation, I told her. But you made your choice, Melissa. You prioritized your wants over our vows. That is something I cannot move past. The days that followed my departure from our home were both liberating and devastating. My new apartment felt sterile and empty compared to the house we had lovingly furnished together. Nights were the hardest with too much quiet and time to think, but mornings brought a sense of peace. I had not expected waking up without the weight of suspicion and betrayal. Word spread quickly through our social circle. Melissa reached out to mutual friends and family, painting herself as repentant and me as unforgiving. Some took her side, suggesting that one mistake should not end a marriage. Others understood my position and offered support. The division of allegiances was yet another painful aspect of the separation process. My parents, traditional in their views on marriage, stood firmly by my decision. Marriage is a promise, my father said during one of our weekly calls. Without trust, what is left? Melissa attempted reconciliation multiple times. She sent heartfelt emails, left voicemails, pledging to do whatever it took to rebuild trust, and even had flowers delivered to my office with notes apologizing for her momentary lapse in judgment. Each attempt reinforced my decision rather than weakening it. Her characterization of an 8-month affair as momentary only highlighted our different perceptions of reality. The divorce proceedings moved forward with the cold efficiency of the legal system. Financial assets were divided, the house was put up for sale, and 7 years of marriage were reduced to signatures on documents and court appearances. Throughout the process, I maintained a calm exterior that surprised even me. The initial shock and pain had transformed into a steady resolve to rebuild my life on my own terms. 3 months after moving out, I attended my first meeting of a support group for people going through divorce. Sitting in a circle with strangers who understood the unique pain of a marriage ending was unexpectedly comforting. It was there that I met Michael, a man in his 50s who had been through a similar experience a decade earlier. The hardest part, he told me after the meeting over coffee, is not letting this experience make you bitter. Trust will come again, but you have to stay open to it. His words resonated with me. I did not want Melissa's betrayal to define my future relationships or harden my heart permanently. I began consciously working on healing, not just surviving. I rediscovered old passions that had taken a back seat during my marriage. My acoustic guitar, which had gathered dust in a closet for years, became a nightly companion. I joined a local rock climbing gym, challenging myself physically in ways that demanded complete focus and presence. I reconnected with college friends. I had lost touch with people who knew me before I was half of Franklin and Melissa. Work became another anchor. I threw myself into new projects, earning recognition from senior management, and a promotion 6 months after the separation. The structured problems of engineering provided a welcome contrast to the messy emotional landscape of divorce. As the 1-year anniversary of discovering Melissa's affair approached, the legal process was complete. We were officially divorced, the house sold, and our lives fully disentangled. I had expected to feel sadness on this milestone, but instead found myself experiencing an unexpected sense of accomplishment. I had faced one of life's most painful challenges and emerged intact, perhaps even stronger. Through mutual friends, I heard that Melissa and Jason's relationship had ended shortly after our divorce was finalized. She had apparently realized that what they had built on deception lacked a strong foundation. Part of me felt a vindication that I am not proud of, while another part genuinely hoped she had learned something valuable from the experience. When we ran into each other at a former colleague's wedding 6 months later, the encounter was less awkward than I had feared. Time and distance had dulled the sharp edges of pain and betrayal. "You look well," she said, genuine warmth in her eyes. "I am," I replied, and meant it. "You too." "I have been doing a lot of therapy," she offered, "working on understanding why I made the choices I did. That is good. I hope it helps." There was a pause heavy with unspoken words and shared history. "I was wrong, Franklin. About everything. Not just the affair, but the justifications I created for it. I see that now. I nodded, accepting her words without feeling the need to either absolve or condemn her. We all have our journeys of understanding. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. Are you seeing anyone? Yes, I said simply. Someone who shares my values about honesty and commitment. Her smile was tinged with regret, but also genuine goodwill. You deserve that. Walking away from that brief exchange, I felt the final pieces of resentment I had been carrying dissolve. Melissa's affair and our divorce would always be part of my story, but they no longer defined me or my future. Sometimes the best way to strengthen a marriage is not to open it, but to have the strength to close a chapter that no longer serves you. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to a healthier, more authentic life? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming betrayal and finding self-respect. And do not forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for their values is not just acceptable, it is essential. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true strength often comes from knowing when to walk away, not just when to stay and fight.